Good evening. Tonight, I would like to talk to you about the Dyatlov Pass Incident. And why it's coming up again, I did a video on it a while back, but why I wanted to talk to you guys about it tonight is that Russia is reopening the investigation into the incident. And I'm very glad to see that they're doing this because there's so much mystery, there's so much speculation. And when we look at it from the unknown paranormal world, a lot of people think it was a UFO. Some people think it was a Bigfoot. Some people think it was a dog man. Some people think it was the KGB, that they came across some kind of experiment or something. Some people think it was an extra dimensional monster or demon of some kind. Some people think that it was caused by carbon monoxide poisoning or something inside the tent that drove them all mad to go run out in the snow. But whatever the circumstances is, we never really got any clear questions. And that's why I think it's absolutely fascinating that Russia's reopening the investigation. I mean, this was in the 50s. And what's also interesting is that Russia, like a lot of countries in Central and South America and all over the world, for as much as we think of Russia as the communist regime and hardline government and controlling media, as in a lot of countries out there, they actually are pretty open when it comes to investigations of Bigfoot and the Yeti and the Almas and UFO sightings and UFO investigations in general, kind of out there kind of things. A lot of countries seem to be a lot more open about it than America. And when you really get down to it, when you look at the cover up and a lot of things that America has done with UFOs and Bigfoots and other paranormal phenomenon and cryptid type activity, you realize that America is really not forthcoming government wise with what they know or what they've experienced. And a lot of countries are a lot more open. So if there is something that might be a little more out there, a bigger explanation, something a lot harder to believe, then it probably would come out of another country. And when it comes to Bigfoot disclosure in general, we always look at the United States of America because we think of Bigfoot North America. But disclosure could really come from another country because, like I said, Bigfoots are found all over the world. And that's kind of some of the implications of why I think it's important that Russia's reopening this investigation. Plus, it's just a downright fascinating story, horrifically tragic at the same time. And we're going to talk about the incident a little bit here for those who aren't familiar with it. We'll do kind of a brief synopsis of it. I did a video on it a while back. It was one of my earlier videos. I got flagged by YouTube because I had pictures of some of the bodies, and I'm not going to include those here. If you really want to see them, you can Google them. We're just going to kind of talk in some generalities. So between February 1st and February 2nd, 1959, 9 students from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, which is middle of nowhere pretty much in Russia, decided that they wanted to go out on skiing hiking trip, which is where it's like cross-country skiing and hiking, and they camp along the way and backpacking. And I say people was tougher back then because they really, I mean, it was sub-zero temperatures, heavy snowfall, and it did not stop them. They went out just fine. They were all experienced. They had all done this. I mean, just like how people hike and backpack in the United States and Russia, they do it in the sub-zero temperatures in skiing. And this was recreation for them. You know, you got to think of young college students, maybe a few older college students going out and doing this, hanging out, just like how we would go snowboarding or camping today. This was recreation for them. They were all in good shape. They were all used to this. They were all quite experienced. I think maybe a couple of people on there I remember hearing maybe weren't so experienced. But most of them, you know, they had good cold weather equipment. They were in good spirits. They had plenty of supplies with them. They had plenty of equipment. They had done this before. They knew what they were doing. Even 9 people huddled in a tent is pretty good body heat. So the chances of these people surviving were really good. And you know, if they encountered a bear, a particular blizzard that drove them into their tent for a couple of days, they had food, they had all the supplies, they had experience. I mean, there wasn't any more risk than anybody else going camping, I think. And that's what makes this a little bit different, is that the government, their exact words were, an unknown compelling force drove them out in the snow in the middle of the night. Now, we're going to have pictures of it, but their tent was found cut open. And here's a picture of Igor Dyatlov, was cut open in the middle of the night from the inside. Something drove them out into the cold. They were missing shoes and half clothed. You know, you're talking like sub-zero temperature where your toes are going to freeze and fall off in minutes. And they ran out into the snow. And there were no signs of an animal attack or anything like that, or a bear going after them. You think they would probably huddle into the tent if there was a bear outside, and why they would cut a hole in the back when there was a flap in the front. So there's a lot of speculation on what happened. And, you know, these were young, in shape, smart, fit people. These weren't dummies out doing this. These weren't amateurs. They knew what they were doing. They knew the risk. They grew up in the snow. They grew up in the cold. They had a great resistance to it. You know, they knew it was going on. And the fact that they would be driven out in the snow and their bodies were found along this, basically along a trail. A couple of them were found right after that they went missing. A few of them were found, and then some more bodies were found later on when it thawed. But some of the more bizarre circumstances, see, here's a picture of the tent that the investigators found a few days later. But one of them was missing their tongue. Some of them had radiation burns. Some of them had, you know, wood marks in their hands and splinters like they tried climbing a tree. Some of them had wrapped clothes around their feet from the bodies of the others. So it's almost like a few of them had died, and then they went back to try to get supplies, and then they later on died. It looks like they all died of exposure. Some of the bodies were found near where they were trying to build a fire. Just very bizarre circumstances. There's plenty of documentation about the incident on the internet. You really want to go into detail, you probably find a good 45-minute documentary. But we do short videos here, so I'm just trying to update you on the story, not go over the whole thing. But you can see here on the map, it pretty much spells out where the tent was happened, where they cut it out, where the bodies were found, in this very remote area. And that's been a big thing in the paranormal world, in the mystery world, the unsolved mystery world part of the thing, and people with an open mind often look at this case, because this is not really missing 411, but has a lot of the same hallmarks. And it's fascinating to me that people in the Bigfoot world often say that it was a cryptid of some kind of a Yeti, some kind of like what we refer to maybe as like a Wendigo or a Gugwi type creature drove them out. And I'm not necessarily discounting people who believe this theory, because it's just a theory. They're all theories. We can believe whatever they want. But when you look at the radiation burns and being driven out of a shelter and cutting a hole in the back, like if there's a Yeti at your front door of a tent and there's a small tent and you just cut a hole in the back, it would just take 2 steps around and get you. And there's other things that say maybe it was a dog man or some kind of paranormal creature, maybe some like Skinwalker Ranch thing types going on with disembodied voices and extra dimensional things going on, something that drove them out. I've heard people even say that maybe it was demonic possession from some of the people inside there, inside the tent that drove the other people out, that they were blocking the entrance. Maybe it was a blizzard and they were buried and they couldn't find it and it was pitch black. I've heard people say that it was UFOs. And to me, if you're into this, you know, actually I just heard a statistic that more people believe in UFOs than Bigfoot. So if you want to go with some out there theories, let's just try to think maybe one of them was getting abducted. Maybe some craft came down and they were lit up the front of the tent and they wanted to cut their way out of the back, and then they just died in the snow. The radiation burns are interesting, that maybe they got exposed to something. There's also other theories that they KGB agents killed them and made their deaths look quite mysterious to throw people off, that maybe they saw some kind of a secret Russian aircraft or some kind of a Russian missile launch that they weren't supposed to. Who knows? But the Dyatlov Pass has always fascinated me. I would love to see what the investigation turns up. I hope it's not just some kind of investigation of, oh, you know, it was carbon monoxide by a lantern in the tent that drove them all bonkers and they went out in the snow. I mean, that very well could be the answer, and I think part of us wants us to be something more mysterious. But the radiation burns and tongue missing and partial clothing and all the other bizarre circumstances that go along, I'd be very interested to see what the Russian government, what the officials say about this, because it's really fun to speculate, but at the same time, we would like some answers. Like I said with the last video I did about the missing boy, and a lot of the historical encounters of Sasquatch abducting people. Like I said, I don't think the Dyatlov Pass is necessarily Bigfoot, but I think this definitely falls into the category of bizarre and paranormal. And it's almost like the veil has been lifted. A lot of these stories are starting to come out and be more mainstream. And I think that's a good thing. I think there's just modern science and technology and our beliefs and what we can Google has brought us so far. And I think there's just this big quest for knowledge that's going on with us today. And I think it's quite fascinating. So anyway, please stay safe out in the woods out there, folks. Please take care of yourselves. If you like what you see, give this video a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please subscribe. We've got a lot of good content coming out. Thank you very much.